How you doing, YouTube? Matt, Massive Beer Reviews, back with yet another review. A little bit of New York brewery collabed for a reason, hopeful goodness, in the form of Ommegang Brewing, Brooklyn Brewing, and Saranac Brewing. It is their New York Limited. It is a bottle conditioned white lager made for the Savor Convention get-together that kind of celebrates food pairing with beer. I've never had this before. I think it was produced, well, I know it was produced for Savor, but I think it was actually only available there. I've never been to Savor, but I was lucky enough to procure a bottle. I did a podcast with John Hall from Beer and Brew Magazine, author, journalist, podcaster, Steal This Beer. And we sat around and did an interview and ended up hanging out for about an hour or so after and just drinking some beers. He ended up sending me home with this. So thank you very much, dude. Kind of excited to give it a whirl. As far as what it says on here, it says New York Limited. It's a white lager with honey and spices. Savor 2013 collaboration, 8.5% alcohol by volume. On the back here, we have greetings from New York State brewers. We have combined malted barley, raw wheat, yeast, hops, and spices, and ideas grown in our great state to bring you this unique take on a wheat beer. This white lager, 100% re-fermented in the bottle, is a collaboration nod to the glorious past and brilliant future of New York State brewing. Done and done. Like I said, Saranac in Brooklyn. So Brooklyn brewing, as of almost all time, except for the past couple years, has done almost a bulk of their brewing at Matt Brewing up in upstate New York. That's Saranac. So it's almost like same brewery, but not really the same. And then you have Ommegang, kind of old school brewery, kind of tossing their bits and pieces into the mix. And it's classic Brooklyn brewing, kind of bottling your big kind of 750 Brooklyn etching. Really nice labels, done and done. So curious to see how this lands. So it's an aged bottle. You're talking about 5 years old, but you're also talking about a lager, a bottle conditioned lager. Spices. A little bit of honey thrown in there. We'll see what's what. Come on. If we can actually get it open, that would help. So, I'm going to have to walk this cork a little bit. Nope. Now it wants to come out, though. Give a little bit of a nudge. Once you give her enough, she always wants to come out. So, we'll see what's what. Okay. We'll see. Might be a little TCA going on that cork, so we'll see what happens with this sucker. But yeah, you're talking about a higher ABV lager with honey and spices. It could go so many different directions, especially with age. Got a little bit of Dirty Glass Mafia going on in there. I assure you, I clean my glasses pretty religiously. It just seems like the water out here is kind of weird. It has a rich. I talked about this in a beer I did right before this one. It kind of has like apple cider vibes to it. Rich kind of apple cider vibes. Quarter pinky finger, off-white head, and just a bit of bottle conditioned kind of haziness to her. So, does she look like lager? Unfiltered. Let's get a nose on her. I definitely get the lagered portion to show. It has that soft kind of rich funkiness. That's how lagers come off to me. And there's a nice kind of soft apple vibe to it. I actually said that about the beer that I drank previous to this one. But it's kind of in there and getting this apple vibe. Even a little bit more kind of green apple. I know that's a negative off flavor when it comes to a lot of beers. I think it comes off a little bit more purposeful and meaningful, a little yeast esteriness as opposed to just a negative in a beer in a positive way. And you get that honey in there. It doesn't come off overtly sweet. It comes off a little bit more richer, a little bit more adult kind of. I talked about this in the past week. Certain candy bars, certain desserts are more adult based. They tend to be a little bit more kind of. They have a depth of flavor to them as opposed to being just straight up just sweetness, and it kind of has that going in there. But honey also does come off a little bit buttery to me, a little bit thick, a little bit fatty, and you kind of get that in here too. Let's dive in. Cheers. really soft. You're talking about time is a beautiful thing when it comes to kind of cutting down and sanding down the edges of sharpness. Now, when you think about a lager, traditionally, you're thinking about something that has a crisp, clean drinkability to it. But you're talking about taking a lager, throwing spices into it, bottle conditioning it, throwing a bit of honey in there. You're not talking about a more traditional lager. What you would get here, honestly, is what I can see brewers trying to make and trying to do with a beer for an event like Savor, to where you're actually making a beer to kind of complement food, because you're getting a lot of that kind of Belgian and German, Austrian, European kind of yeasty vibes, but with a little bit of kind of that New York twist they're kind of talking about. I get that kind of apple thing I talked about. The green apple thing, I think of New York when I think of apples. That kind of lands for me. And again, it's not a kind of off-flavor green apple thing. It's more of a purposeful kind of apple thing. The honey thing also rings a little bit more kind of New York for me. Rings a little bit more kind of American for me. Especially the way it's used here. You get a bit of sweetness in there, but you also get that little bit of creaminess. That little bit of butter. Again, not in a negative way. Not in a diacetyl kind of cream corn kind of buttery, popcorn buttery kind of thing. It's coming off as more of a richness, more of, like, think of Belgian candied sugar, but in a non-super refined honey kind of way, to where it comes off, I don't want to say savory, but it leans that way as opposed to being more sweetened. Yeah, she's just rich. She's tasty. She's subtle. Very subtle. Subtle is the name of the game. Has this kind of softness to it, this creaminess to it. It still retains its identity as a lager while still being a bit more kind of robust, a bit more bigger than being a base lager. And again, how much they're throwing in it, you don't expect it to be like that, but I like it. There's a lot of depth to it. There's a lot of, like, nuances, a lot of direction your brain can take while starting to pick apart bits and pieces of beer. And I think that's kind of, you know, in the end, the ultimate goal and what they want for beers like this, especially, it touches on so many little drips and drabs of flavor and bits and pieces that when you're eating food, it ends up being a very comfortable pairing beer, because it's not in your face, over the top, trying to shove all these flavors in your face, but it's very confident about the flavors that it's presenting. So it's very versatile, is basically the word I'm looking for. And I think it's aged quite well. I don't think it has a much longer time to mature. I don't think if you sat another 3-4 years that it will really gain much. I think it's probably at its peak, if not a little bit on the downturn. Like I said, when I actually smelled the cork, I've got a little TCA kind of thing going on. That's not in the beer at all, so that's nice. But it's a beautiful balance between all the flavors that go in there, from the dryness to the sweetness, to a little bit of bittering, to how all those flavors play off each other. I think what they tried to accomplish in the beer, which was a kind of food-driven beer, being that it was made for Savor, I think they kind of nailed it, to be perfectly honest with you. And I think it's aged quite gracefully. And if you have a bottle, I would urge you to open it, because just from experience, I don't think it really has much more time to get better, for lack of words. So there you go. Let's talk about it. Is it one of the better bottle conditioned spiced lagers? It would be number one. Is it one of the better? To me, it comes off somewhere between a farmhouse ale and a beer de garde. That's kind of how it comes off to me. Is it one of those better beers? Yes, no. Wherever you want to fall on the spectrum of all that stuff, it's a tasty beer. It's a well-made beer. It's a fun and interesting beer, which is what I think a lot of times Brooklyn and Ommegang and the like do. So it comes off well in that respect. Value and availability, it was given to me. Limited stuff. What are you going to do? It is what it is. But if you find a bottle of it, pick it up and leave you with, if you like what we like this. If you like Belgian beers, if you like lagers and you want those worlds to mix in a way that's kind of unique and fun. Because that's kind of where this lands for me. It does have a very big kind of Belgian influence. You get that with Ommegang being involved. You get that little bit of honey and spiced and all that bits and pieces with the Brooklyn Brewery and Saranac being involved. So it's a nice marriage of all the breweries together. So if you like those breweries as a whole, and you're looking for something to pique your interest, to something outside the norm, it's definitely be worth either picking up or cracking open if you're sitting on one. So there you go. Another review in the books. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Down there if you want to talk about it. Massive Beers if you want to check me out doing the social media stuff. Beer Massive if you want to check me out doing the whole podcasting thing. And hopefully you guys enjoyed the review. Hopefully enjoying a nice little savory beer right now. Hopefully see you next time. Cheers.